You are listening to Bedtime Dreamy Tales. Share and subscribe our channel. Story title, The Golden Key, Part 5. "What do you want here, beautiful woman?" he said. "Am I beautiful? I am so glad," answered Tangle, rising. "My grandmother is beautiful." "Yes, but what do you want?" he repeated kindly. "I think I want you. Are you not the old man of the sea?" "I am." "Then grandmother says, 'Have you any more fishes ready for her?'" "We will go and see, my dear," answered the old man, speaking yet more kindly than before. "And I can do something for you, can I not?" "Yes. Show me the way up to the country from which the shadows fall," said Tangle. For there she hoped to find Mossy again. "Ah, indeed that would be worth doing," said the old man. "But I cannot, for I do not know the way myself. But I will send you to the old man of the earth. Perhaps he can tell you. He is much older than I am." Leaning on his staff, he conducted her along the shore to a steep rock that looked like a petrified ship turned upside down. The door of it was the rudder of a great vessel, ages ago at the bottom of the sea. Immediately within the door was a stair in the rock, down which the old man went, and Tangle followed. At the bottom, the old man had his house, and there he lived. As soon as she entered it, Tangle heard a strange noise, unlike anything she had ever heard before. She soon found that it was the fishes talking. She tried to understand what they said, but their speech was so old-fashioned and undefined that she could not make much of it. "I will go and see about those fishes for my daughter," said the old man of the sea. Moving a slide in the wall of his house, he first looked out and then tapped upon a thick piece of crystal that filled the round opening. Tangle came up behind him and, peeping through the window into the heart of the great deep green ocean, saw the most curious creatures, some very odd, all very unusual, and with especially queer mouths, swimming about everywhere, above and below, but all coming towards the window in answer to the tap of the old man of the sea. Only a few could get their mouths against the glass. But those who were floating miles away yet turned their heads towards it. The old man looked through the whole flock carefully for some minutes, and then turning to Tangle said, "I am sorry I have not got one ready yet. I want more time than she does, but I will send some as soon as I can." He then shut the slide. Presently, a great noise arose in the sea. The old man opened the slide again and tapped on the glass, whereupon the fishes were all as still as sleep. "They were only talking about you," he said. "And they do speak such nonsense. Tomorrow," he continued, "I must show you the way to the old man of the earth. He lives a long way from here." "Do let me go at once," said Tangle. "No, that is not possible. You must come this way first." He led her to a hole in the wall which she had not observed before. It was covered with the green leaves and white blossoms of a creeping plant. "Only white blossoming plants can grow under the sea," said the old man. "In there you will find a bath, in which you must lie till I call you." Tangle went in and found a smaller room or cave, in the further corner of which was a great basin hollowed out of a rock and half full of the clearest seawater. Little streams were constantly running into it from cracks in the wall of the cavern. It was polished quite smooth inside and had a carpet of yellow sand in the bottom of it. Large green leaves and white flowers of various plants crowded up and over it, draping and covering it almost entirely. No sooner was she lying in the bath than she began to feel as if the water was sinking into her, and she was receiving all the good of sleep without undergoing its forgetfulness. She felt the good coming all the time, and she grew happier and more hopeful than she had been since she lost Mossy. But she could not help thinking how very sad it was for a poor old man to live there all alone and have to take care of a whole sea full of fishes. After about an hour, as she thought, she heard his voice calling her and rose out of the bath. All the fatigue and aching of her long journey had vanished. She was as whole and strong and well as if she had slept for 7 days. Returning to the opening that led into the other part of the house, she started back with amazement, for through it she saw the form of a grand man with a majestic and beautiful face waiting for her. "Come," he said, I see you are ready." She entered with reverence. "Where is the old man of the sea?" she asked humbly. "There is no one here but me," he answered, smiling. "Some people call me the old man of the sea. Others have another name for me and are terribly frightened when they meet me taking a walk by the shore. Therefore, I avoid being seen by them, for they are so afraid that they never see what I really am. You see me now, but I must show you the way to the old man of the earth." He led her into the cave where the bath was, and there she saw, in the opposite corner, a second opening in the rock. "Go down that stair, and it will bring you to him," said the old man of the sea. With humble thanks, Tangle took her leave. She went down the winding stair till she began to fear there was no end to it. Still down and down it went, rough and broken, with springs of water bursting out of the rocks and running down the steps beside her. It was quite dark about her, and yet she could see. For after being in that bath, people's eyes always give out a light they can see by. There were no creeping things in the way. All was safe and pleasant, though so dark and damp and deep. At last, there was not one step more, and she found herself in a glimmering cave. On a stone in the middle of it sat a figure with its back towards her, the figure of an old man bent double with age. From behind, she could see his white beard spread out on the rocky floor in front of him. He didn't move as she entered, so she passed round that she might stand before him and speak to him. The moment she looked in his face, she saw that he was a youth of marvelous beauty. He sat entranced with the delight of what he beheld in a mirror of something like silver, which lay on the floor at his feet, and which from behind she had taken for his white beard. He sat on, heedless of her presence, pale with the joy of his vision. She stood and watched him. At length, all trembling, she spoke, but her voice made no sound. Yet the youth lifted up his head. He showed no surprise, however, at seeing her, only smiled a welcome. "Are you the old man of the earth?" Tangle had said. And the youth answered, and Tangle heard him, though not with her ears. "I am. What can I do for you?" "Tell me the way to the country whence the shadows fall." "Ah, that I do not know. I only dream about it myself. I see its shadows sometimes in my mirror. The way to it I do not know, but I think the old man of the fire must know. He is much older than I am. He is the oldest man of all." "Where does he live?" "I will show you the way to his place. I never saw him myself." So saying, the young man rose and then stood for a while gazing at Tangle. "I wish I could see that country too," he said, "but I must mind my work." He led her to the side of the cave and told her to lay her ear against the wall. "What do you hear?" he asked. "I hear," answered Tangle, "the sound of a great water running inside the rock. That river runs down to the dwelling of the oldest man of all, the old man of the fire. I wish I could go to see him, but I must mind my work. That river is the only way to him." Then the old man of the earth stooped over the floor of the cave, raised a huge stone from it, and left it leaning. It disclosed a great hole that went plumb down. "That is the way," he said, "but there are no stairs. You must throw yourself in. There is no other way." She turned and looked him full in the face, stood so for a whole minute as she thought. It was a whole year. Then threw herself headlong into the hole. When she came to herself, she found herself gliding down fast and deep. Her head was under water, but that did not signify, for when she thought about it, she could not remember that she had breathed once since her bath in the cave of the old man of the sea. When she lifted up her head, a sudden and fierce heat struck her, and she sank it again instantly and went sweeping on. Gradually, the stream grew shallower. At length, she could hardly keep her head under. Then the water could carry her no farther. She rose from the channel and went step for step down the burning descent. The water ceased altogether. The heat was intense. She felt it to her core, but it did not touch her strength. It grew hotter and hotter. She said, "I can bear it no longer." Yet she went on. At the long last, the stair ended at a rude archway in a glowing rock. Through this archway, Tangle fell exhausted into a cool, mossy cave. The floor and walls were covered with moss, green, soft and damp. A little stream spouted from a rent in the rock and fell into a basin of moss. She plunged her face into it and drank. Then she lifted her head and looked around. Then she rose and looked again. She saw no one in the cave. But the moment she stood upright, she had a marvelous sense that she was in the secret of the earth and all its ways. Everything she had seen or learned from books, all that her grandmother had said or sung to her, all the talk of the beasts, birds and fishes, all that had happened to her on her journey with Mossy, and since then in the heart of the earth with the old man and the older man, all was plain. She understood it all and saw that everything meant the same thing, though she could not have put it into words again. If you like this story, please give this video a like. For more stories, go to bedtimedreamytales.com. See you in the next story.